Okay. So we'll begin with the recitation of the Nembutsu. So please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Yeah. And I'd like to again thank all of you for joining us for this 4 session lecture talks, and I will show you how this came about. And I'm just going to. You can see that. So I was asked to go to Maui this coming March. To, oh, I'm just going to mute you all because I'm getting some feedback. If you don't mind, I'm going to mute you all for now. Okay. Yeah, so I was invited in to go this March for this 2-day lecture, and as you can see, it's quite an intensive session. It goes from 9:30 a.m. Saturday till 2 o'clock Saturday, and then on Sunday again there's another lecture. So 4 lectures, and then the Ohigan service as well. So I was asked to go and do this, and I thought, well, it'd be nice if I could sort of have a dry run or of what I was proposing to do, and so that's why I came up with this idea of holding these sessions. So thank you very much for joining us, and if you have comments or I love to hear them afterwards. Some of the stuff, for those of you who have attended previous um, lectures, is repetitive. But basically, what I wanted to do was ultimately I will get to Shinan Shonin's teachings, Nembutsu teachings, but there's some things that we have to touch bases on. First of all, is that Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is very much a part of what we call Mahayana school of Buddhism. So in Buddhism, there are two large schools: the Theravada, which means way of the elders, and Mahayana, which means the larger vehicle. Oh, by the way, I do have notes, and I'm going to send it out as soon as I finish this, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. Um, I just didn't want to send notes prior to it because I will be sharing stuff on the screen. But if I send out the in-depth notes, then people end up just sitting there reading it, and rather than having that, I wanted your attention. So there will be notes that I'll send out after the lecture tonight for this session, and then subsequently I will send them out as we go forward. But so, anyways, in the larger picture of things, Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, it falls under the umbrella of what we call Mahayana Buddhism, which tends to be a little bit more liberal in the way of understanding. And but for many of us, we learn about Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, but the connection between the fundamental teachings of the Buddha and the Nembutsu teaching, there can be some uh, misinterpretations or misunderstandings. And I'll show you a picture here. So I'm going to share this, and then yeah, there we go. Did the screen change? It's not changing. There we go. Okay. Can you all see that picture? You can all see that picture, right? Okay. So this picture was actually, let me increase it a little. How's that? Oop. And then I'll move. Okay. So this picture was taken in February of 2023, and there was a group of us sangha who visited the Parliament provincial legislative building to support a members of Parliament motion, which was done by Teresa Watt, who is our represent MLA from Richmond, and she put out a motion to designate the first Sunday in May to be designated as a Buddhist cultural day. And it was the first time actually in BC legislature that motion put forward by a member of the opposition had actually been accepted by the government. So following this, then there was a proclamation made by the BC government. Here's the proclamation saying that basically Buddhist Cultural Day that they recognize. In this one, this says May 2023, but their proper proclamation should be that um, every first Sunday in May, now in the BC provincial government calendar, will have it as a Buddhist cultural day. But that's really not what I wanted to show you. It was this photograph here, and can you tell me something that sticks out to you on this picture? And please unmute yourself and chime in. Does anything stick out to you in this picture?
It's nice to see someone young there, and I also see you there.
Yes, and look at myself and Roy Sensei. Um, so the three people, the three in front, are actually parliamentarians. So they're politicians. Okay, so don't look at these three here. But and then this person back here, I think she's an assistant to one of the nuns. But in general, if you look at this picture, the rest are all sangha. Now, do you see something? Does anything stick out to you?
Zen.
Well, the gentleman in the front row with the glasses has a white kata,
As what?
a white scarf. Everybody
Oh
else.
yeah, no. So don't look at these three because they're politicians. Okay.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I see different
I
representation.
want you to look at the sangha in the back here.
Yeah.
It seems like there's different representation of different Buddhist schools.
Well, there is different there were 14 different Buddhist groups, I believe. 14 different countries represented.
Okay. And then
More than 14 Buddhist groups, but
only Jodo Shinshu two not the Kaikyoshi.
yeah, Jodo Shinshu ministers, yeah.
You and the Roy Sensei.
Yes.
Only
And what's different about us from the rest?
dark black clothes.
No, the
Black robes, yeah.
got more hair.
And then
We have hair.
and a
Right,
scarf.
we have hair. Do you notice that? We're the only two that have hair, other than this assistant back here,
Oh,
right? So,
Oh, I see.
so yeah. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So, it's very easy for us to look at Jodo Shinshu and say we're different. In fact, when I was studying in Japan, actually, this happened almost right as soon as I got to Japan, maybe about 3 months after I got to Japan. So this is going back to like 1988, I believe it was. So I was asked to join a panel discussion at the Ryukoku University, and they had on this panel there were four of us. There was a Korean monk, there was a Sri Lankan foreign student, there was a Japanese student, and there was myself. Okay, so there were four of us on this panel discussion, and it was very interesting because the Sri Lankan foreign student made a comment that he, when he came to Japan, that he found Japanese Buddhism very strange. In fact, out of that, he said Jodo Shinshu in particular seemed not like Buddhism. And the reason why he said this was he said that, well, the Jodo Shinshu followers and ministers, they eat meat, they drink alcohol, and they even get married. And so he found this very odd. He said, that's not Buddhism. And, up until that point, being raised in my family, my father was a minister, and my grandfather was a minister, and my mother's side of the family, ministerial or temple family, and they were all Jodo Shinshu. And I had never thought of it as being odd. But in fact, as you see from this picture, that we're a minority as opposed to the majority. Yeah. Roy Sense and myself, we do stick out when we take group picture like this. These are all basically ordained Sangha clergy. Incidentally, this young child, he's training to become a Rinpoche. So the way the Tibetan Buddhism works is that they look for the reincarnation of great masters, and he's apparently supposed to be one of the reincarnations of a master. So he's in the monastery from this very young age. But anyways, so that got me thinking when I heard about this Sri Lankan student making those claims. It's true. We do eat meat. We do. Some of us. Well, I know some ministers that like drinking alcohol, and definitely we ministers do get married, and without that, I would not be here. Obviously, I'm grateful for that. But this got me thinking. So Jodo Shinshu seems to be quite different from the fundamental or general Buddhism. Having said that, though, if we go down and we look at Shinran Shonin himself, you'll get a little bit of a different idea, though, because as you can see, if Shinran Shonin was standing in that group, he would fit right in because he still looks like a monk, right? And so, interestingly enough, though, this Shinran Shonin's attire here, this sort of looks like a scarf here. The white piece around his neck. That's very typical of the robes of the Tendai school of Buddhism, and of course that's where Shinran Shonin actually came from, and that's why he still has the traditional Tendai robes at that time. So I'm going to get into, and when we look at Shinran's writings too, though, he does come out and say, how joyous I am, Gutoku Shinran, disciple of Shakyamuni. Rare is it to come upon the sacred scriptures from the westward land of India and the commentaries of the masters of China and Japan, but now I have been able to encounter them. Rare is it to hear them, but already I have been able to hear reverently entrusting myself to the teaching, practice, and realization that of the true essence of the Pure Land Way, I am especially aware of the profundity of the Tathagata's benevolence. Here I rejoice in what I have heard and extol what I attain. So, and again, he also is quoted, but in these quotes, he's basically saying that I am a disciple of Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha, and so um, I will get more into Shinran and Jodo Shinshu, but before we go there, what we need to do is to establish the fact that Jodo Shinshu are the teachings. So um, we need to establish the fact that Shinran Shonin's teachings, Jodo Shinshu teachings, are based squarely on fundamental Buddhist teachings. And so, in order to understand that, the first thing that I'd like to do this evening is look at the enlightenment of the historical Buddha, and also the very first teaching that he expounded, because I think there's a lot of information that is gathered from these events. So when we go back to the historical Buddha and we look at uh, the life of the Buddha, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I wanted to highlight the the prince, Prince Siddhartha, leaving the royal palace in search of the enlightenment. And as you know, there's the very famous story of Siddhartha exiting the royal palace on 4 different occasions and seeing the elderly person, the sick person, the funeral procession, and then finally a mendicant. And he decides to leave the royal palace in search of what we call the spiritual truth. And so he goes on a journey. And the moment that he makes this decision, it's said that King Mara, who is seen as is often considered like the king of the underworld. Mara wants to dissuade the prince from leaving the palace, and so when Prince Siddhartha leaves the royal palace, he makes a proclamation, and the legend goes that he says, "If I am able to attain true enlightenment, let this hair remain suspended in the sky. If I am unable to do so, let it fall to the ground." And it's said that he cuts off his hair and he throws it up in the air, and the divinity Indra catches that hair in the jewel net and places it in what we call a Tavatimsa heaven. And here's a picture of a very famous movie, the Little Buddha, and this is Keanu Reeves
So,
portraying the Buddha and cutting off his hair just before he goes into doing going off on his own. Has an interesting, or just an aside. So you're all probably familiar with the actor Keanu Reeves and the fact that he was the main character in the movie The Matrix, and they often compare Matrix to Buddhism. And in fact, 9 years prior to him playing the actor in the role in Matrix, in which he fights against the computer world, a dystopian computer world, that they call the Matrix, and in search of reality. And there's a comparison of the Buddha fighting against Mara to find the truth. And so it's interesting that Keanu Reeves, the same actor, 9 years before he became famous in The Matrix, had actually portrayed sort of a similar battle with him as the role of the Buddha. Um, yeah. So anyways, he cuts off his hair and throws it up in the sky, and it doesn't come back. So then he goes on his search, and he starts off by going following various great uh, mendicants at that time, learning different things from them, but none of them really fulfill his search for enlightenment. So he then ends up going and doing what we call 6 years of ascetic practices. And this is a very famous statue of the Buddha during this ascetic practice. And you can see by this image, it's actually quite well carved in that you can actually see the sinew and the veins of the Buddha and the bones, and it's showing how emaciated the Buddha became during this period. And I've talked before about this ascetic practices. It was believed at that time that the mind and the body were two separate entities, and one could go through self mortification to rid the body of the impurities to come to the purity of the mind. So this self mortification included things such as not fasting for a period of time or not drinking, and they even have one passage where they talk about practice of not breathing. Anyways, he does this for 6 years, and he realized that isn't the way. So he gives that path up, and he receives a rice porridge from this maiden named Sujata. And that once he regains his strength, then he goes and he sits under what they call the pipala tree and makes a pledge that he will not move until he attains enlightenment. And that then uh, is followed by this great battle with Mara and his minions. So once he's made this vow and he sits under the pipala tree, Mara is very, very concerned of the resolve of Siddhartha at that time. And so he, first of all, Mara sends, uh, dispatches his daughters to seduce him. And again, this is another picture from the little Buddha, and you see Mara's daughters trying to seduce the historical Buddha with their beauty. And of course, he takes one look at them and says, you may be beautiful now, but your beauty is only fleeting, and you will, just as everybody else, you will grow old and die. And instantly, they turn into old hags, and they disappear. So then Mara is distraught over this, and he then sends his minions to attack the Buddha. And this is a very famous image of that. You could see Mara on the right hand side and his minions trying to attack him. And they have also depicted his daughters on the bottom there. But again, the Buddha remains calm, and instead of being attacked, it just turns into flower petals that fall gently by his feet. And finally, Mara then yells and screams at the Buddha. But in the end, he actually comes back. Mara comes back as the image of the Buddha. And he calmly tells him, you deserve to reap the benefits of your existence right now, to forego this fruitless search and enjoy or appreciate the moment right now. And the Buddha doesn't flinch at that. And finally, it's said that Mara then vanishes. And here's a picture again of Mara as he looks. So I thought it was very interesting then here. I wanted to just discuss a little bit why this King Mara was so against the Buddha attaining enlightenment. And we have to look at who this Mara is in order to understand. So he was sometimes known as the King of Death or Mara the Tempter, but he was actually a figure who was at the highest of what we call the celestial heavens. And that sounds really good, but it really isn't. And I'll explain that. So in order to understand that, we have to understand that in the Buddhist cosmology, they look at, they call it the 6 realms of suffering, or 6 realms of samsara. Samsara is the world of delusion, and there are 6 different realms in it. Interestingly enough, in Japanese, samsara, they pronounce it as saha, which is the root word for the word Shabbat. So when in common Japanese, they use Shabbat to mean sort of a regular daily grind. Junichi-san, how would you explain Shabbat in just regular
Shaba,
Japanese?
Shaba is a real world, like lots of bad
Yeah,
people.
it actually, so they often use it like with the Yakuza shows and stuff like
Right.
that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's actually a word that is used commonly in Japanese, but no, most people would not know that it has its roots from this Buddhist word.
Yeah, yeah.
So, anyways, this samsara, existence of suffering, and there's 6 different realms, which are the hell, hungry ghosts, beasts, ashura, humans, and this heavenly realms is it's sort of a pseudo heavenly realm. And to understand this better, there's this very famous, and I've shown this before in my lectures here, this Tibetan tanka. Tanka is a painting that depicts something, shows something, and this is full of meaning in this particular tanka. And but without getting into all the details, you can see in the middle here there are 6 different realms. Okay, and all these 6 different realms here. So you have hell down at the bottom here. You have hungry ghosts on up on its right. You have the beast up on its left, and then above the beast you have, they call it ashura, or fighting spirits, and on the right hand side you have the human realm, and then right at the top here, this is what we call the heavenly realms, or the pseudo heavenly realms. And this heavenly realms, so according to the cosmology of Buddhism, it says that there's they call it Mount Sumeru, is the center of this pseudo heavenly realm, and it's actually sort of shaped in the shape of an hourglass. Okay, and so at the base of this heavenly realms, it is from the 4th realm on. They call it the 6 heavenly realms, and these 6 heavenly realms, the first 2, they consider it terrestrial. So if you look at this, there's this slab that sort of is tapered into the center here. The one just before the tapering, that's the first of the 6 heavenly realms. And then it goes out, and there's this large slab here is the second of they're still called celestial. No, they're called what are they? Not celestial. The terrestrial. Terrestrial. They're called terrestrial because they're still attached to the base of the mountain. Okay, so the terrestrial realms, in those realms, because they're still attached to the base, you can see. I don't know if you how well you can see this, but there are spirits that are you can see in the fighting spirit realm here with the blue Buddha, there's arrows being shot up towards this heavenly realm. And conversely, there are beings from this heavenly realm shooting down arrows to the fighting spirit realm. So because they're still connected to the earth, if you will, they still fight with these what we call the Ashura beings from the realm of Ashura. So those are the first of the two of the what they call the heavenly realms of this heavenly realm, the terrestrial heavens, and the first of those is called the heaven of four great kings, or in Japanese, uh, Shidai Oshuten. Shidai Oshuten. And if you go to some of the famous Japanese temples, you'll find statues like this. These are very commonly found and in Osaka, there's a place called Shitenoji, the four gods, if you will, and they're gods of this particular realm of this heavenly terrestrial heaven. Then you have another heavenly terrestrial heaven, and then from there they go into what they call celestial heavens. There's four realms of heaven above the terrestrial ones, and they're no longer attached. They're no longer touching the mountain. They're celestial in this fact that they're in the air, if you will, truly heavenly, if you, I guess. And there's what we call the Yama realm, and the fourth one is the realm called Tusita heaven. Tusita heaven is very, very famous because this is where it was said that prior to Siddhartha being born, he was a ascetic by the name of Sumida. And he was said to have been in this Tusita heaven. And so he was there waiting to be born to become Siddhartha. It's also said that this Tusita heaven is where the Maitreya Bodhisattva is waiting to become the next Buddha. So this is the fourth of the heavenly realms. You have then a fifth heavenly realm known as the joy emanating realm. And then you have the sixth and final, the top of the heavenly realms. And this one is known as the Takeji Zaiten. Takeji Zaiten, Japanese. Pari Nirmi Shavartin in Sanskrit. I apologize, my Sanskrit is terrible. But this realm here is supposed to be the highest of these pseudo heavenly realms. And there, in the center of it, is said to be none other than Mara. So remember, I mentioned when the Buddha or when Siddhartha first left the palace, Mara tried to dissuade him from going on the search, and it was also Mara who the Buddha, when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree, it was Mara who was trying to battle against him, and the question that has to be asked is, why was it so important for Mara to battle the Buddha? And it's because, and you'll see this in this tanka that I had shown. Okay. So Mara basically is in control of the whole 6 realms of samsara. Okay. And according to this, and this creature here is called Yama in Sanskrit, but in Japanese we call it Emma. So
Oh,
Emma-san.
I heard
Okay.
it.
So Emma-san is helping guard along with Mara, keeping beings in this existence of samsara. So it's called the wheel of samsara because it goes round and round and round and round when you're still in this stage of existence. But if you could see in this picture up at the very top, you see here's the Buddha who has escaped basically that existence of samsara, and he's pointing to the beauty of the moon, okay, the enlightenment. So this is why for Mara, it was very important because he didn't want the Buddha showing how people can escape this cycle of samsara, suffering. And that's what the Buddha attained when he ultimately attains enlightenment. So, where is that? So the Buddha conquers. After he conquers Mara, he enters a deep meditation, and he acquires what we call the 3 wisdoms of knowledge. Knowledge of remembrance of former lives, knowledge of birth and death of beings, and knowledge of casting off ignorance which had bound him to the cycle of birth and death. So he had cleared that uh, existence of samsara, and he became enlightened. And at that time, the Buddha uh, recited this verse. I sought the builder of this house of suffering, but I was unable to find him. The wheel of samsara turned around and around, and I repeated lives of suffering again and again. But you, builder of the house, I see you now. You will not build the house again. All the rafters are broken, and the ridge pole is destroyed. My mind takes leave of craving and attains nirvana. And it said that under this, so it was known as the Pipala tree, but once he attained enlightenment, then they started calling it the Bodhi tree. And so then he follows this with another 49 days under the Bodhi tree, meditating. And while he's doing so, he has he thinks of many different things, and I'm not going to go into all the details here, but he ends up concerned that he's worried that these teachings are so pure that the common person wouldn't understand them. So he hesitates on uh, spreading the teachings, but it's then that he is encouraged by some heavenly beings saying, please, they beseech him to go and expound these teachings. So when he decides to disseminate the teachings, he figures, well, who should he teach first? And it's said that he decides that when he was doing the 6 years of ascetic practices, there were 5 mendicants who practiced with him. In fact, these 5 were selected by Siddhartha's father, King Suddhodana. So when Siddhartha left the royal palace, his father, King Suddhodana, even though he was very sad that his son had left the royal palace, he still nonetheless cared about his son. So he sent 5 of his best warriors, guards, to look after him. They basically follow him, make sure he doesn't get into any harm. And eventually, those 5 become the mendicants who practice with him during those 6 years. So when Siddhartha gave up that self mortification, those 5 monks then at that point they thought, oh, he's given in to worldly ways, so they leave him and they end up going to a place called Sarnath. And so the Buddha decides, well, these five will be good good first disciples or listeners. So he goes to this place called Isipatana in Sarna, known as Deer Park, and it's there where he gives this very first teaching, the turning of the wheel Dharma, or Dharma Kaka Pavatana Sutta, and he shares it with the five ascetics. And when he first walks towards them, they are very hesitant to listen to him because they think he's given up. But as he gets closer to them, uh, they notice that there is an aura about him, and so they want to listen to what he says. So this very first teaching is known as the teaching, the turning of the wheel of Dharma. And here's a couple of pictures of Sarnath. So you can see this very large stupa on the left hand side here. When the Buddha passed away, it was said that his body was cremated, and they created a stupa in where he was cremated. It was a place called Kushinagra, but then they divided his remains, and they spread his remains to 8 different places, them being this and because it was known as the place that he gave his very first discourse. And so this stupa is supposed to have some of the relics, and then around it, this temple formed, and these are all just the remains of what remains. So there used to be actual walls in temples, but they're now all you could only see the footprints basically. But in the center of this place, there is this pavilion with these statues of the Buddha, and he's talking to the 5 mendicants, and they listen to this teaching, the turning of the wheel. I will send you the actual turning of the wheel text as well, but basically there's well, the very first, actually, maybe I'll just bear with me, and I will quickly read this uh, Turning of the Wheel Sutra. It's a fairly short sutra, and I put it on here. I think I took it off this part. Yeah, I did. Okay. Let me just pull up another one. Just gonna pull up. Bear with me for just 2 seconds here.
Who cut his hair?
Okay, I'm just gonna pull something up here. I'm gonna share with you. Okay, share. Okay, and I'm just gonna go down, go down. So this is the actual text. It's called the Discourse on Turning of the Wheel Dharma, Dharma Kaka Pavatana Sutta. And here he starts off, this is what I have heard. At one time, the world honored one was staying near Varanasi at Isipatana in Deer Park. At the time, the world honored one addressed a group of 5 monks, saying, Bhikkhus, there are 2 extremes that a monk should avoid. What are the two? The first is a devotion to sensual desire and the pleasure resulting from sensual desire. Such devotion is base, pedestrian, worldly, ignoble, and unbeneficial. The second is devotion to harsh austerity. Such devotion is painful, ignoble, and unbeneficial. By not following either of these extremes, the Tathagata has realized the middle way that gives rise to seeing and understanding. This seeing and understanding are at the basis of peace, knowledge, full awakening, and nirvana. So this is the first point in this sutra that has to be recognized. This was where the Buddha talks about what we call the middle path or the middle way. And what we see from this, so for the first 29 years of his life, Siddhartha was a prince in the kingdom of Kapilavastu. And so he led a very, very rich life for those first 29 years. Then once he left the royal palace, he did the 6 years of ascetic practices, very hard, austere practices. And this was also not the way. So he experienced both extremes of life, and he realized that neither is the answer. So just, enjoying your sensual pleasures, that alone will not allow you to attain enlightenment. Neither will going to the opposite extreme. Okay? And this point of the middle path basically is telling us to understand that we need the proper effort or proper energy in order to attain enlightenment. And there was a very famous story, and I've mentioned this in previous lectures, of one of the disciples of the Buddha. His name was Sona. And Sona had asked the Buddha about the right way to practice, at which time the Buddha, so Sona, before becoming a disciple, was a musician. He played sort of, it's almost like the Japanese, they call it biwa. It's like, I don't know, like a banjo, kind of hard to explain, but a string instrument. And that's there's a very famous story, of course, when the Buddha asks Sona, knowing of the musical background, that what kind of sound does the if the strings on the instrument are too loose, what kind of sound does it make? And Sona says, of course, it makes a very dull sound. And then the Buddha says, well, what happens if you tighten the strings too tightly? And Sona says that they will break. And so he says exactly, he's saying, finding that perfect tautness is important, and that's the middle path according to the Buddha, right? Not going to the extremes, one extreme or the other, but figuring out what is the right tautness in order to attain or to practice and attain enlightenment. So this is what he's talking about with this middle path here. Okay, so that was the first point of this important point of the sutra. So then he goes on to explain more fully about what this middle path is. And he said, what is the middle way? That the Tathagata has realized gives rise to seeing and understanding, when that seeing and understanding are at the basis of peace, knowledge, full awakening, and nirvana. It is the noble eightfold path, consisting of right view, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is the middle way, Bhiksu, that the Tathagata has realized, that gives rise to seeing and understanding, when that seeing and understanding are the basis for peace, knowledge, full awakening, and nirvana. So this is very interesting because normally this Eightfold Noble Path, usually when we talk about what we call the Four Noble Truths, this usually comes out at the very end. But if you, as you can see from this sutra, in fact, the Buddha mentions this first before he mentions the other uh, three of the Four Noble Truths. So he sort of goes about it, giving you the end result before he backtracks and explains it. Okay, and by the way, this Tathagata literally means thus come. So this is sort of the Buddha who has attained enlightenment has come to share the teachings. Okay. You may have seen this. You probably have seen this word before, Tathagata, and that's what it means. It's another name for the Buddha, Tathagata, thus come. And then he goes on to explain about these Eightfold Paths by then going through the Four Noble Truths. So he says here, because there's a noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, old age is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, grief, mental anguish, and disturbance are sufferings. To be with those you dislike is suffering. To be separated from those you love is suffering. Not having what you long for is suffering. In other words, to grasp the five aggregates as though they constitute a self is suffering. So he then goes on to talk about the first of the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering. Right? Then he goes on and says, here, Bhiksu, is the noble truth of the cause of suffering. It is a desire to be born again, delighting being born again, attached to the pleasure found in this and that. There is a craving for sense pleasures, for becoming and for not becoming anymore. So basically, this is the cause of our suffering. But if you look at what he's saying here, it's basically our ignorance is the rudimentary cause of our suffering is ignorance. And then he goes on and he says, here Bhiksu is the noble truth of ending suffering. It is a fading away and ending of craving without any trace. It is giving up, letting go of, being free from, and doing away with craving. So again, ignorance causes the cravings, desire, and that creates the suffering. And our attachment to wanting to maintain things statically, that all creates suffering. We can't let go of the idea of change, or we can't accept the idea of change. So then then he goes back to those Eightfold Paths, and he says, here, Bhiksu, is the noble truth of a path that leads to the end of suffering. It is the noble Eightfold Path, the right view, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Then what he goes through is he goes back again to the Four Noble Truths, and he says, for each of the Four Noble Truths, there are three stages that have to be sort of cleared. So one is knowing, the second is doing, and the third is accomplishing. Okay. So if you look at this first one, he says, monks, when I realize the noble truth of suffering, seeing, understanding, insight, wisdom, and light arose in me with regard to things I had not heard before. So he first knows of the noble truth of suffering. Then he said, when I realized that the noble truth of suffering needs to be understood. So this is the doing. Okay, it's one thing to know about the suffering, but now you need to understand it. And then seeing, understanding, insight, wisdom, and light arose in me with regard to things that I had not heard before. Then he says, when I realized that the noble truth of suffering has been understood, so now you've processed it, you sort of understand it now, seeing, understanding, insight, wisdom, and light arose in me with regard to things I had not heard before. So, for the first of the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, first you need to know it, know of it. Then you need, or be aware of it first, and then get to know that, and then know that you have actually accomplished knowing that. Then he goes on again with the second one, which is the causation of suffering. And he says, when I realize the noble truth of cause of suffering. So he realizes it first, and then he says, then you actually have to go through the process of giving up, letting go. And then once he's done that, he realized that he has given up the desires or the cravings. And so then the third of the noble truth, again, the ending of suffering. When I realized the ending of suffering, he said, first of all, that he realized that you need to actually experience it, and then it has been experienced. And finally, again, with the Eightfold Path, he says there are 8 practices, knowing it, then actually practicing it and accomplishing it. So these total, what it says here, uh, as long as insight and understanding of the Four Noble Truths in their 3 stages and 12 aspects. So what this means is, so each one of these Four Noble Truths, there are 3 stages to it. First of all, realizing it, then doing, either knowing or letting go or experiencing or practicing. So that's sort of a verb. There's an action. And then finally, the accomplishment. And each one of the Four Noble Truths have these 3 aspects. So when you multiply 4 times 3 stages, then it becomes 12. And those are the 12 aspects that he's referring to here. So when we think of each of the 3 stages of each of the Four Noble Truths, it creates what we call 12 aspects. And when when this has all not been realized, then he said, I could not say that in the world with its gods, Maras, Brahmas, recluses, Brahmins, and humans, someone had realized the highest awakening. However, he said, when I did realize these 3 stages and 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, then I could say that I, in this world with gods and Brahmas, that someone had realized the highest awakening, that he had attained enlightenment. Okay, and so then, when they hear this, the 5 monks rejoice at hearing the teachings, and upon hearing the Four Noble Truths, the pure eye that sees the meaning of the teachings without attachment arose in the monk of Kondana. He realized that everything that is of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. When the Dharma wheel had been turned by the world-honored one, the earth gods proclaim, near Varanasi at Isipatana in the Deer Park, the highest wheel of the Dharma has been set in motion. It cannot be turned back by recluses, Brahmins, gods, Maras, Brahmas, or anyone in any world. When the 4 kings heard the earth god's proclamation, they proclaimed basically the same thing. And then when the gods of 32 heavens, the gods of the realm of dead, the Tushita gods, the gods who rejoice in creation, the gods who have power of thought, so they all recognize that the Buddha attained awakened enlightenment. At that hour, at the moment, in the instant of time, the proclamation reached the world of Brahma, and the 10,000 world systems shook again, and immeasurable splendor was seen throughout the world, surpassing the splendor of all the gods. Indeed, the world honored one spoke. Indeed, Kondana has understood. Indeed, Kondana has understood. Thus, Kondana received the name Kondana who understands. So this, of course, the second important aspect of this particular teaching was the introduction of the Four Noble Truths and the processes that each of these go through. As an interesting aside, if you've ever gone to a Tibetan temple, you may have seen these Dharma wheels. They're these long tubular things that are on an axle down in the center, and you walk by them and you spin them, right? And they're supposed to be spun 3 times, and that's the 3 processes of each of the Four Noble Truths. So 3 times each one, 12 times altogether to to show that you're going through each of the phases of the Four Noble Truths. So at the end of the sutra, the Buddha then urges his disciples to go and spread the Dharma. So this is the third important point of this first Dharma teaching, was the Buddha wanted to spread the teachings, wanted to share the teachings with others. So I've just gone over 8:30 now. I'm going to leave it here for tonight, and I'm going to go back to this again next week, and then look at the Jodo Shinshu Buddhism and how Shinran has applied these teachings, and how we understand these Four Noble Truths, and then how that is applied to general Buddhism, as well as how Shinran has used that in his teaching. So I will send out these notes, the complete notes, and then if you have any comments or questions, please let me know. If you think, this was hard to understand, or needed to do this better, or whatnot, please feel free to chime in and let me know. Okay. Are there any? Wait, let me stop sharing. Are there any questions at this time? Yes, no?
Is Keanu Reeves Buddhist?
It's a good question. I know he has followed Buddhism, but I don't know if he actually claims to be Buddhist or not.
I actually looked it up, and no, he's not.
Yeah, okay.
What is he?
What is
It didn't say, actually.
But I like him because he's a day younger than me.
okay.
He's Canadian. Oh, he might be American now, but he was from Canada, Canadian origin.
Yeah, from Canada, right? うん
他何と聞いてもややこしいね。
ややこしい、難しい。
Oh, okay. I will look into it. Thank you, Ron.
生田さんじゃないこれ。てるこさん。
てるこさん。
Denise. Oh, thanks, Denise. Okay. Where I'll have to look. Do you remember whereabouts that was, or?
In one of the ones that you showed us, and it was in bold font and it was large.
Okay. I'll look into that. Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, and I'll see you next week then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Thanks.
Thank you
That
so
was
much.
great. Yeah.
Thank you.